Hello, Techlore community. Today we are very, very lucky to have Douglas Tuman join us for an interview about privacy, freedom, Monero, and more. Lots of great stuff lined up for us today. Definitely tune in for this entire interview because it's going to be fantastic. It's from Monero Talk, where he's interviewed people in the privacy community, Monero developers, and other amazing guests. And he is here to join us to talk to us about what he's passionate about. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks for having me, man. It's I gotta correct you though. It's
Thank you.
Tuman, not Truman. Although when I ran for Congress, that was the easiest way to get people to remember my name. I'd be like Truman without the R. So Tuman.
Well, thanks for correcting me because then I would have had to re-record the intro in post and do that all in editing. So I guess we'll just keep that in my embarrassing mistake. Actually, that's a really good. You started with your political stuff. So you ran for Congress in 2020.
See how?
What was the decision-making process behind that? Why did you do that? How did it go? Well, just tell me about that.
Yeah, it was really out of a love for Monero, cryptocurrency, digital cash. I kind of saw where the puck was heading with regards to governments potentially trying to clamp down on crypto, and in particular coins like Monero, because of their privacy nature. And so that's kind of what got me out of my seat and why I decided to run. I was concerned that if the debate did take place on the floor of Congress with regards to whether or not something like Monero should be banned, that nobody would be there making what I thought were the the valid, strong arguments for why Monero actually aligns with the ideals of America and is not contrary to them. And that's why I ran. So it's really out of a motivation to preserve liberty, and that was my motivating factor. Believe it or not.
That's very cool. Yeah, it caught me off guard because I actually knew you first from the Monero talk, and then seeing that you ran was kind of a like, oh, it's interesting because we try to involve ourselves in politics, but very few of us actually consider running for Congress. That seems like a big commitment. What was it like to actually be on that campaign?
Oh, it's tremendous commitment. I mean, the other reason I did it is because I am involved in my local Republican Party in a very big way. I have a lot of kind of connections there and networks. So it wasn't like I was just some outsider saying, I want to run for Congress. I've worked on campaigns before. I knew what I was getting myself into, but I didn't realize how much of a commitment it really was going to be until I did it. And yeah, it was overwhelming. It was great. It was an amazing experience. I might do it again. I have a lot of people egging me on. We did very well, better than anybody expected because we ran in what is primarily a Democratic district, and I ran on the Republican line. But I'd say the hardest or most stressful part about it was really just staying true to myself and my ideals and not allowing people or groups pull me in a direction that I didn't want to be pulled towards. And that's really what you're up against when you get into politics, because everybody wants you to support their cause, which is fine. That makes sense, but you just have to make sure you don't lose yourself when you're doing that and you don't start to make empty promises. So the Monero thing was very simple because that's something I believe in, and I would never sway from it. And really, I always went back to my core values of liberty, in pretty much wherever whenever an issue faced me, I would kind of use these kind of core principles to determine where I stood on an issue. And I use that to kind of be my anchor.
I like that as whether I think you're Democratic or Republican or whatever political party who's listening, I think pretty much everyone can agree that they wish that their politicians uh, would be a little more truthful in what they want to actually achieve and not just cater to what everyone's trying to get them to do.
Easier said than done. No, I mean the
I
pressure
believe it.
is very difficult. And then you have people attacking you. It's we experienced it in crypto Twitter too, right? Like or I'm sure you experience it as well. You're kind of becoming a public figure. Um, People attacking you for certain things. You may express things in some way that people don't agree with, but
Oh, don't. Yeah, no, like,
yeah,
I have to constantly send reminders, and I have to be reminded in our team group chat. We're not going to please everyone. We speak highly of a project in a review. The people who love that project go, "You didn't love it enough." The people who hate the project go, "Why do you even love the project?" And there's just no pleasing people. We might do a tutorial, it becomes outdated. Oh, I guess they made a bad tutorial. And I'm sure that you experience the same thing. Oh, they said they're going to do this. They did it, but not quite as good as we wanted. And there's lots of confirmation bias in these things as well, because you'll see two people accuse you of doing the direct opposite thing, which is always fun.
yeah.
Yeah. And actually, so I think it's important to really dive into the crypto route, because much of our audience is involved in cryptocurrencies, but a lot of them are just here for privacy and security. And they may have never dabbled in cryptocurrencies. They might not see a use case for it. So let's start there, actually, in regards to more of the technical discussions. I think the big question, which should segue pretty well into what you care about, is Bitcoin anonymous?
Is Bitcoin anonymous? No. Well, I mean, there's ways in which you can try to stay anonymous in Bitcoin. It's pseudonymous, but it's all the transactions take place on a transparent ledger, which anybody can see. In theory, you don't know who controls what public address, but once those connections are made, once you connect people to their addresses, it loses its anonymity, and you can then thereafter track everybody's transactions. And that's kind of the fear, and that's what's taking place. So theoretically, it could be anonymous if used correctly, but in reality, given that there's a lot of people that want to connect identities to people's wallets, it effectively is not anonymous.
So, how come everyone seems to think Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are anonymous?
That's a very good question. I mean, I myself thought that when I first got involved in crypto, and I was very excited about it. I think people just assume when they, a peer-to-peer digital, when you read the white paper, a peer-to-peer digital cash system, I think people assume it's anonymous. Literally, when we call it cash, right, we assume that anonymity goes along with that. And the way it was initially used, it was used. Its initial use case was uh, on dark markets, right? That's where we saw people initially start to use it. And so I think everybody then assumed, all right, if people are using this on dark marketplaces, then it must be anonymous. Little did they know it's quite the opposite. And I think it's just misinformation. It's just people not understanding technology. Although I think it is changing rapidly now. People are beginning to become aware. And then you have those that, as they do become aware, are actually starting to highlight the fact that it's not anonymous, or, that it's transparent. They're starting to highlight that as a positive instead of a negative, because all right, well, because it's transparent, we could view all these transactions. People, it's a great way to uh, audit those that use it. Let's Governments are using Bitcoin. It's great. We'll know how they're using their money. It's also great because it will reduce the amount of fraud and nefarious things that can take place if we know where money is flowing. So what's happening now is I think people are becoming aware, but the spin is now, okay, well, actually, it's good that you can see these transactions. Some obviously in the Bitcoin community disagree with that, but those that just want the number to go up, so to speak, that see it as a way to just have their fiat value increase, are almost okay with the fact that it's transparent and see it as a positive.
So, how does Monero, how does it differ from Bitcoin in that way?
Yeah, so same basic technology, blockchain. So you have all these nodes coming to consensus on what transactions took place, who's sending what to whom, and making sure there's no double spends. So all that same magical stuff that happens with blockchain that Bitcoin essentially invented, solving the Byzantine generals problem, so to speak. But the ledger itself is obfuscated, so you can't see the amounts. So if you try to look up a Bitcoin transaction, you don't see any amounts. That's obfuscated with confidential transactions. You don't know who sent the transaction because of a technology called ring signatures. So you can't tell who actually signed a transaction. It's a group of people that it's like one of these 11 people may be the signer. You don't know which one, and you don't know what address it's going to using something called stealth addresses. So there's actually no address to even go look up on the blockchain to see what was received. So those three technologies in combination effectively create something where you don't know who's sending what to who.
So, if that's the case, if someone is interested in privacy, is there any? And yes, I'm kind of fishing a little bit for responses, but is there really much incentive for someone to be using Bitcoin over Monero if their goal is privacy?
If their goal is privacy, absolutely not. If their goal is using digital cash, I'd say absolutely not. I don't know. I no. There is no reason. I mean, the only reason is if you're concerned about, or if your incentive is really, I guess, about making an investment with the hope that it goes up in price. Uh, Bitcoin is doing a better job at selling itself as digital gold. While, although fundamentally speaking, I think it lacks certain aspects that would make it digital gold, it's doing a good job at convincing investors, large investors, that it is the coin that you should be storing your value in. I could get into why I think ultimately it shouldn't be viewed as that. But if you're just looking to make transactions, let's ignore store of value. It's just for purposes of making transactions. There's really no reason why you would use Bitcoin over Monero.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that. So, do you see crypto as an investment or an asset with a use case in the middle, both?
Yeah, I see it as all those things. Obviously, I think the first initial use case, the most important use case, is as digital cash. So, this ability to transact peer to peer. Nobody can see you transacting. They don't know how much you're sending. They can't censor it. It's extremely important. They can't stop that transaction. They can't surveil it. They can't confiscate your Monero or your crypto once you send it to somebody, or if you have it on your person. That's what I see as the killer app. That's what the breakthrough was. So this ability to, through the internet, send cash to somebody, just like we do in the real world. Nobody knows that you pass it along to somebody and they don't know how much, and which I think is an extremely powerful concept. It's basically, you know, free speech money, this ability to transact without anybody stopping you, and that is a form of, I see it as a form of speech in itself. And the investment arm portion of it is really just a belief. If you believe that utility is something that will grow in value over time as more people use it, as the network grows. So that's what I see as being the investment angle. So if you think there's a purpose for digital cash and that it's here to stay and that eventually more and more people will start using it, then sure, then you should see it as an investment, because probably it's going to go up in value if the network grows. I mean, we're talking about Metcalfe's law. It's just the natural thing that will happen.
How did you stumble on Monero? Like, what was your crypto journey like? It sounded like you started maybe on Bitcoin because you didn't know what Bitcoin entailed privacy wise. So, was there a discovery there for Monero? How did that go down?
Yeah, 100%. So Monero is what I thought Bitcoin was. I actually started with Dogecoin in like 20. I remember the day. It was 2013 Christmas Eve. I didn't know anything about crypto. I had like seen like little news articles here and there and things about, it's going up in value. And I just assumed Bitcoin was just some attempt at being digital cash, but that it was centralized, because I was always interested in this concept of creating cash for the internet. And I just assumed without doing the research that, Bitcoin was just another one of these attempts, but it was going to be shut down because it was centralized. I had no idea that they figured out how to make a decentralized system. I saw some article on this new thing, Doge, and I was like, all right, maybe I'll take purely as more a gamble, not an interest in the technology. I want to turn $50 into $5,000. I'll go buy 50 worth of Doge, and I went on Reddit and I used PayPal and they sent me the Doge, like complete things you wouldn't want to do, and I don't even think you can do today. And I stored it in an online wallet, which is like rule number one. I woke up the next morning and all my Doge was gone. It was the great Christmas hack of Doge. So anybody that's been in Doge from like day one will remember that day. And tons of Doge. Everybody's online wallets were fleeced. And I lost my $50 of Doge, but it was probably the best 50 I ever lost because I was like, there's no way that this technology that everybody's so excited about works in this way where you could just easily, like, it just can get hacked and stolen. I'm like, there must be more to it. And that's what led me to Bitcoin, to read the Satoshi white paper, to understand if you hold your keys, you hold your coins. And it was a eureka moment. I was like, wow, this actually is digital cash. And it took another couple of another year or so, or I don't know, it took a while. I mean, I became a BTC maxi, and people were saying, "Oh, it's traceable, but I was kind of ignoring it and not really grasping it until I went to start using my Bitcoin and actually giving it to my friends, sending it to my friends. Like, oh, check out this Bitcoin thing, get a Bitcoin wallet. And as I'm doing it, I'm realizing they could just go look up my wallet address and see how much Bitcoin I have because I sent them Bitcoin. I'm like, this is absurd. I'm like, this is not digital cash. And that was the eureka moment for me. And that's what led me on the search of something that would more closely take on the attributes of digital cash. And that's when I found Monero.
Yeah, so a couple questions there that I have. First, and this is mostly, I guess, challenging. I'm for the record, I do like Monero, but I do want to challenge if Monero is needed, because I know a lot of people who love Bitcoin think Bitcoin can accomplish pretty much everything that every other crypto can do. Can Bitcoin somehow be set up in a way to accomplish what Monero does?
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think fundamentally Bitcoin can never be Monero. It would require them to essentially adopt confidential transactions, which was invented by Bitcoiners, essentially by some of the biggest brains behind Bitcoin. But they've clearly decided that they don't want to do that. They've made different design decisions. And so it doesn't look like Bitcoin will ever become fungible on the protocol level. So it's always going to be on this transparent ledger. Now, there's things that can be done on the outside. Coins can essentially be mixed, but you're never going to create a truly fungible protocol where every unit equals every other unit. A Bitcoin is always going to have a transaction history that you can look at. Monero, you don't have that transaction history, just doesn't even exist. Bitcoin is never going to lose that transaction history. They can try to do things to mix it up and make it harder to detangle. But unless it fundamentally changes as a technology, I don't think it will ever be able to mimic digital cash.
Very cool. I think that that's what people need to hear, is that there's just some things that it would be extremely difficult for Bitcoin to ever achieve. And I guess that brings me to my next question, which is if I tweet something about Monero on Twitter and it happens to do well, right? Monero community is like, wow, we love this tweet. We're going to retweet it. It's going to do great. Before I know it, it's got 100 likes. And what happens next? The spam bots start kicking in. And they're all like, Monero, you need to try this cryptocurrency that's 3 times more anonymous than Monero. So, why is Monero currently kind of the gold standard for a privacy coin? And is there any other project that you think competes with Monero or beats Monero?
Yeah, so this is where I actually start to sound like a Bitcoiner, which is funny, right? Because, some of the arguments that Bitcoiners make are absolutely correct, So I do believe in this idea of first mover advantage and network effect, and that for some other technology to come along and replace it and do better it's going to have to do essentially something, I'm sure you've heard this, like 10x better, right? For it to replace, right? So like for a new Facebook to come around and replace Facebook, for everybody to say, all right, I'm going to leave Facebook and go over to some other social network, it's going to have to do something 10x better.
Because clearly 10x data breaches won't do it.
So with Bitcoin, the move from Bitcoin to Monero, there's justification there. There's a real difference, right? You're going from a transparent ledger, a traceable currency, to one that's completely untraceable. To now go from Monero to maybe something that's newly invented but is using some newfangled technology where it's even more anonymous, is it really going to get you too far? It's like it already works as digital cash. To say it's all right, it's even more cash-like, it's probably not going to put you over that hump. When you have real adoption and network effect that's already taking place on Monero, it dwarfs any other privacy coin in terms of actual use. If you look at the transaction count of Monero versus shielded Zcash transactions, any of these other coins that are trying to do the privacy coin thing, they're really just not even used. They're talked about. It's more about getting people to buy it so it goes up in value. But go on the dark market, they're using Monero, or actually they're still using Bitcoin. Why? Because of the network effect. That just shows you how strong the concept of network effect is, that you still have people using Bitcoin on the dark markets when it makes no sense. Like you're taking a huge risk. Why? But it has network effect. So for people then, Monero has really carved into that space. It will become the number one used coin on the dark market, and for something else to come about and replace it it's just not very likely. It's that the train has already left the station, so to speak.
Yeah, and this is kind of a more technical question, maybe, but a lot of people seem to. I get this question a lot in our comments, actually. Anytime we bring up Monero, you always have people who would rather opt for Zcash, like the shielded Zcash transactions. So I'm sure you can elaborate on the defaults between Monero and Zcash, which is already a big point of discussion. But how would also a shielded Zcash transaction compare to Monero on just a technical sense? Obviously, assuming both parties are accepting both cryptocurrencies and the networking effect is out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, so the argument is that the anonymity set in a Zcash shielded transaction is much larger. So comparing that to ring signatures, theoretically, uh, an individual Zcash transaction has a larger anonymity set. But like you said, it's not private by default. This is something you have to opt into. I know they're moving in that direction, but it's just not the case currently. Monero has always been private by default, and it always will be. So that makes a huge difference right there. So whether or not your individual transaction may, on a mathematical level, have a larger anonymity set doesn't really matter when it's not when all transactions aren't private by default. So that's kind of the simple answer there.
And then another question we get about Monero And this is the kind of thing that's like you're trying to convince people who are already basing information on something that doesn't really exist, but is Monero compromised? And I know it's kind of a hard thing to debunk because it's not like we have much evidence to even base that on, but we do sometimes get people who say Monero is compromised, it's a honeypot. What do you and how do you respond to that?
Yes. So my response to that is I'd be more concerned about something like a Zcash, for example, right? Which currently relies on a trusted setup. So you trust the fact that when it was set up, that there was no hanky panky that took place where those that set it up essentially have a backdoor into it. With Monero, there's no backdoor concern because of the way the technology works. What you can do with Monero is it's open source. You look at the code, and as long as you believe that the math is sound and that it was implemented correctly, and obviously, it's not about trusting but verifying, then that concern shouldn't be there. Now, I don't have the ability to go read the Monero code base and understand if it was implemented correctly. I don't have the ability to understand if the encryption behind it and the math behind it was done correctly. So it is at the end of the day, there is some trust involved where you're trusting that because it's open source and because so many intelligent people are behind the project and looking at it, and the community is so large that with each day that goes by, uh, there's less and less chance that it has been compromised in any way or that there's any flaw in the code or in the implementation. So sure, there's no way to say for certain that something isn't compromised, but the fact that it's open source and is reviewed and can be reviewed by anyone, that's where you get your security from. Which is, when I first got into Bitcoin, I had those same concerns. I didn't understand this stuff well enough. I didn't how am I going to trust? I'm going to store $10,000 in this thing, and I could wake up the next morning and for whatever reason, it could just be extracted from my wallet, right? Because somebody figured out how to essentially hack hack Bitcoin. But over time, we built trust to the point where that question isn't even asked anymore. People just now believe because they know that it's been looked at and verified. So that's what I would say. Just as time passes, more intelligent people look at it, review the code, and review the implementation of it.
It's funny, that's the double-edged sword with like the whole open source community in general, right? It's like I guess the larger a project becomes, the more that the open source label actually matters. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think personally it means much when you have a tiny project with 3 stars on GitHub being open source. Like, yes, it's cool that they're coming forward and publishing their source code. I think that speaks a lot to their character and it speaks to their values. But unless you're able to actually review the code yourself, and even if you are, you're not like the expert in everything in the world. So like the more people looking over the code, the more powerful open source becomes. So that's why I guess just to tie back into your Monero being one of the first privacy coins, you have the most people looking over it too, which I think adds to its power as well. Just to
Exactly.
inject
And the
some of my own thoughts there.
Exactly, and the most time at which people have looked at it. So, somebody comes in and produces a better Monero, right? Like how many people have looked at it and how long has it been looked at for versus Monero, which has been around for a long time in crypto land.
Yeah, so I think that actually before we pivot to privacy, I do want to ask you a bit about what you do in the Monero space. So you manage your show, Monero Talk. What's it about?
Monero Talk, it's kind of similar to what we're doing right now. I bring people on. I bring developers on that are working on Monero, people that are working on Monero related projects, and every show relates to Monero in some way. It's really the pursuit of finding what the best version of digital cash that exists. I currently think that's Monero, and I'm constantly questioning it and questioning those that are working on the protocol.
Very cool. So if someone comes along with a bow and arrow and it's objectively better, would you rename your show to Monero Talk?
I guess I'd have to. I don't know. Or maybe I'd keep the name as Monero Talk, and it would. I don't know. I don't know if that day. I'd probably just retire. Actually, is what I'm doing.
No, it's very cool though. I listened to some of the talks. Um, Douglas actually had me on the Monero Talk as well, which I can leave down in the description. So if you want to see that interview and more of what you're seeing now, but from essentially inverted roles, there's that as well. But definitely go check out his stuff. Do you do anything else outside Monero Talk?
For Monero stuff, yeah. So we have Gratuitous that we started. That's a company that we try to showcase one of the digital cash use cases of Monero. Basically, we sell coffee. It comes from Guatemala, and you can send tips in Monero that go directly to the workers on the farm. We went out down there. We taught them about Monero, gave them their own private keys. We have Monerotopia, which you see behind me. That's another YouTube show we do, and that's more community based. So Monero Talk, I interview people one-on-one. Monerotopia, we have anybody that wants to jump on from the community, and we talk about like kind of that week's news. And we're throwing a Monerotopia event. We can get into that, but those are kind of
We'll get into that later.
yeah, those are kind of the main things I'm doing right now.
Very cool. Sounds like you're very busy then.
We are. Me and Sunita, she's behind the scenes. She's on Monerotopia. She helps out with that publicly, but she's always behind the scenes helping out with everything. But yeah, we do a lot.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And you also have a really nice community too, which goes along with most of the Monero community. I think that it's always been a very pleasurable experience. To pivot into privacy now, since we are ultimately a privacy and security community, how do you feel that privacy fits into the cryptocurrency world? And do you think, I guess, cryptocurrency is a necessity for people who care about privacy?
Uh, yeah. Well, Monero is private by default. I think any true cryptocurrency essentially should be. I think that should be the expectation, that when you use cryptocurrency, it is private. Anybody that's concerned about their privacy, that wants to maintain their privacy, especially in this ever increasing digital world, is going to want to use a privacy preserving cryptocurrency. There's going to be really no other way to transact value, uh, and maintain your privacy unless you use a cryptocurrency. You're not going to be able to do it. Obviously, you can't do it through credit cards or Venmo or anything else. And then, with that being said, you're going to have to use a crypto that's private by default.
This whole, I realize I probably should have asked this sooner, but this whole talk, we've talked about privacy, why it matters. There was an implication that we care about privacy. Um, so what are your greatest privacy concerns? And I guess why do you value privacy?
Yeah, for me, it's really it comes down to a kind of philosophical thing. I'm not so concerned. I'm out here talking to you, right? I'm very much in public. I ran for Congress. Like I'm out there, right? So it's not like I'm hiding from society. A lot of people know a lot of things about me, but what I don't want them to know is my thoughts, right? I don't think anybody wants that, right? We could start at that, right? You wouldn't want some technology to exist where they can read your mind, right? And why don't you want that? Because I think that would lead to us no longer essentially being humans, being individuals. We lose our individuality. So I think privacy at its core allows us to maintain our individuality as humans. It's that privacy that gives us the ability to essentially be ourselves, have our own thoughts, and to communicate in private so that we could express what we want to express without being censored or without our speech being chilled. Essentially, privacy preserves individuality, is the way I look at it.
Nice. I pretty much, I know we talked about this when I was on Monero Talk, but I think we line up pretty similarly there, which makes sense considering, well, we both have semi-public personas. Um, so yeah, it's a question that you probably get a lot too.
I do, and it's more the concern for privacy is a very real one now, given that we're all on the internet all the time, 24/7. And it used to be, we didn't have these devices in our pockets. It used to be very easy. We took privacy for granted. Uh, you just walk around out in the real world, and for the most part, your life was private. But now we have devices on our person that are essentially recording our every movement. When we're on the internet, everything we do is recorded. It can be tracked and traced. If not now, then in the future. It's a real. It's not a concern. It's a reality that privacy has been lost. It's been completely degraded away from everybody, and we have to fight to get it back. And we have to use technologies uh, where privacy will be guaranteed. I don't think it's no longer about asking governments to provide us the ability to live private lives, but it's about building technologies that we can use that will guarantee our privacy, no matter what uh, any corporation or government would like to do otherwise.
I think everyone's going to like that answer. It's nice because I don't know, and this is kind of the issue with echo chambers, which every community technically is one to some extent. But I'm sure everyone who's listening to this is probably going to agree with everything you said. And so I guess the next challenge would be, how do you convince those around you to also care about privacy? So, what's that like for you? Do you have any luck convincing people around you to at least care a little bit more?
Yeah, for me, I'm just in awe of people that don't. Right, like I'll be honest. I'm very disappointed in humanity with that regard. I just obviously you and I and probably everybody listening to this, thinks it's an important thing. But there's so many people that they're really just not stopping to think about it. I think it requires some abstract thought. They look at it and they're like, well, it doesn't really affect me, right? I use the internet, I go on Amazon, I buy my stuff, it's all convenient. Social media is great, Netflix, I got it all coming in. They see the convenience, and they're not looking long term and seeing what it may potentially lead to. And when you talk about things like tyranny and whatever, people's eyes glaze over. They just kind of think you're crazy, right? A lot of people just think like, well, what are you so afraid of? Like, we're not gonna all be living in some weird techno tyranny. So yeah, I'm personally disappointed in the fact that people don't see it, but I do think that's changing. Unfortunately, though, I think it's not going to really hit home until things get even worse than they already are. I mean, we saw it with COVID. It's slightly related. There's a lot of things going on there where people's rights were being trampled, and you have a big portion of society that was just okay with that. But that's starting to change now too, and I think there's going to be some seminal events that happen that start to open people's eyes. Maybe things like central bank digital currencies. Once you actually go to reach into your pocket and cash literally no longer exists. That's the direction we're headed in, where cash no longer exists, and all you're going to be able to do is transact with things like Venmo and credit cards, or central bank digital currencies that the government is going to give you incentives to start using. Essentially, this is the direction we're heading in, and then maybe once that happens, people may open their eyes and start to think, "Huh, what happened? Why could I? Why is why why can my bank account be automatically locked, or why are taxes just automatically extracted from my income without me even telling the government how much I think I owe? Or it's going to be events like those, unfortunately, are going to have to take place that open people's eyes. Us running around and telling people that it's coming, I'm going to continue to do it, but unfortunately I don't think people will get it until it slaps them in the face.
It's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it's kind of I don't actually like that question very much because it's something I get a lot. And I think people think there's some magic bullet. Oh, yeah, I get people to care about privacy around me because I tell them this one thing. YouTubers hate them for this one reason. And it's like, no, there's not like a single sentence you can say to someone to just make them care. It's a very individual process. And I think it's a very, like, how do you get someone to care about freedom of speech? You know, it's a very personal thing for each person. And that kind of globally accepted right that we've put out for ourselves is still something that is a very personal thing that means a lot of different things to different people. Aside from Monero, what are some of your favorite privacy tools?
Well, here's where I kind of like reveal myself as I don't have the best OPSEC. I have probably horrible OPSEC. Um, I like privacy tools that are super easy to use, essentially, that just happen. It's where I don't have to take steps. So I don't know. I might get some pushback on this, but like iPhones are pretty good at maintaining your privacy if you use them in the right way. Obviously, browsers, right? So you have like DuckDuckGo, so that's pretty simple, or the Tor browser, something you just open and use. For anybody listening, one of the reasons why I like Monero so much is because it's just a way to gain a ton of privacy in a major sector of your life, which is the way you spend your money, uh, just by opting into it and starting using it. I think a lot of the other parts of your life, uh, it's really hard to maintain privacy with just like using one tool here, one tool there, especially the way you use the internet. Like you could be using a VPN, but you're probably doing five other things incorrectly. I'm hesitant to start trying to use all these tools because I just feel like I'm not going to do it well enough anyway. So what I love about Monero is I know if I just do it, at least I know all my transactions, that huge chunk of my life, which is how I spend and hold my money. I know it's working and it's all completely a black box. Every other aspect of my life, I feel like even if I use the privacy tools we have, it's going to kind of be for naught because you can track and trace in every other way. That's my take, which is I know it's not the most inspiring, but it's the way I look at things.
Yeah, and I think that's valid. I don't know. I do like to challenge it though a little bit too, because at the end of the day, the further you are from what the average person is doing, the better protection you have.
Mhm.
So I do think that those small steps matter, and it's something that when I've had to work with clients, a lot of people have that mentality too, which is I think a pretty normal mentality to have. Mostly because it seems like no matter how much you do, there's still going to be one more thing that can be used to track you. But with a lot of people, it's convincing them like, no, like you've taken like 8 steps already, and all those steps, this improved your security from this attack, this improved your privacy from this improved your privacy from that, and like you start tying everything together, and it's a massively improved OPSEC for that individual. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really change your convenience that much after the initial setup. So I do challenge you to at least like implement some basic things like a search engine, a browser, and encrypted messaging, things like that.
Yeah, Signal. Obviously, if you could do all your chatting through Signal, absolutely, why not? That's a very easy, like an easy win, using an encrypted messenger. And we're at the point where most people that you chat with day to day have access to it now too and are willing to use it. Maybe a few years ago, you tell people about something like Signal, they'll be like, "What? I'll just send you a text." Um, so yeah, that's a very low hanging fruit that obviously all my messaging I do through apps like that. And yeah, the browsing, that's an also very low hanging fruit, easy thing to do.
Then I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. So I actually thought this was fun. I got this idea while you were talking. I'm gonna ask you for your favorite X, Y, Z. I have like 6 things. Favorite this, favorite that, and you just got to tell me what they are. Just one word.
Okay.
Favorite crypto?
Monero.
Favorite wallet?
Cake.
Favorite messenger?
Signal.
Favorite VPN?
IVPN.
Favorite browser?
Uh, Tor.
Favorite operating system?
I use iOS.
How about desktop?
I just have a laptop. I just use iOS. Yeah.
Favorite open source project?
Monero.
There you go. I like the answers.
Yeah.
So I guess the last thing that I wanted to ask you about was Monerotopia, the event. So do you want to tell people what that's about? And also, I don't know, it's an exciting event. So just share what you want to share.
Yeah. So it's just going to be a full day, very long day, from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. I think we might even start at 8 a.m. of Monero related talk. We're going to start the day off getting people just excited about the philosophy behind digital cash, why it's important, all these things we're talking about, the liberty ideas. And then we're going to have a session on the tech itself. So we'll have developers talking about Monero, all the upcoming changes that are coming to Monero in terms of technological developments. Then we'll have a session talking about the integrations that are happening with Monero, like atomic swaps, Bitcoin to Monero atomic swaps, ETH to Monero atomic swaps. We might have somebody from the Secret Network there. We'll probably have Haven there, maybe Thor as well, all these other protocols that are now integrating with Monero. And then we're going to have a section on privacy tech in general, which you're going to be a part of, and Seth is also a part of. And then we're actually going to have a evening session, which we call the After Dark speakers, which we're letting people kind of self-register. I don't know. We might shut that down soon because we can't have too many of them. But people that are that can self-register to be speakers themselves. It's just allowing us to, have a free speech conference for a free speech money protocol. So we ran into some issues when we first launched this conference with, who was going to be allowed to talk. So we created this section of the conference that will essentially allow anybody to sign up themselves as long as they agree to talk about free speech money in some way. And that should be interesting and experimental, but it's going to be really good. And then we're going to have drinks flowing. We're going to have vendors selling things for Monero. It should be very good. Should be a good time.
It sounds like an absolute blast. And just to highlight, aside from all the amazing things that he just said and all the amazing speakers, I will be a speaker and will be there. My team will be there, Jonah and Tori, hopefully, as well as very likely Nathan from the New Oil. So you'll see a lot of familiar faces if you go. So we'll leave information on Monerotopia as well in the description. So that should be a lot of fun. That's really the bulk of what I wanted to talk to you about today, Douglas. So I got a few last, a few little bullet points left. Any final things that you'd like to share with our community?
No, man. I think, as I told you when you were on my show, I think you're doing an amazing job. Your question with, how do you get people to care about privacy? Well, I think you've kind of figured out how to do that. You have a tremendous following, so much respect to you and the people that are following you. I think you're building a great, powerful community that's going to help get out the word about the importance of privacy technology.
Thank you. That means a lot. And it goes back to you as well. I mean, you're spreading a lot of good information on Monero, and the community is just fantastic. And I think that a lot of people in our community would like the way that you run things as well. So definitely check out Douglas's stuff. And on that note, how can people find and reach you?
I guess best way is Twitter. Douglas Tuman on Twitter. Monero Talk on Twitter. On YouTube, Monero Talk.
Tuman, not Truman.
Tuman, not Truman. Exactly.
That could be your next campaign slogan. I'll leave all that stuff in the description too, so you all can easily find it. And also, just check out the stuff. Like, come on, I'm putting it down there. Douglas took time out of his day to come on this interview and share some great info with all of you. So the least you all can do, I think, is go ahead and check out some of his stuff and see all the awesome work that he does. And also, especially check out Monerotopia, the event that they're putting on in the next few months. He's putting a lot of hard work into it, and there's going to be a lot of great people there, and it should be a blast. So if you're down to go to Florida for a conference, that is definitely something you should consider doing.
Yep. I should say, we kept the ticket prices super low. And if there's anybody that like really wants to go but can't afford it, but is like really into, maybe you're a young guy or whatever, or you're, reach out. Well, I'll try to see what we can do to make it so you can come anyway. I mean, the idea, this wasn't a make money conference. This is not your typical crypto conference, like people pumping stuff. This is there, people talking about liberty, free speech money, Monero Tech. So if that's something that really interests you, you should definitely come on down or reach out to me, and we can try to figure out how to help you make it work. We just want people in that room that are interested in the tech.
There you go. Couldn't have said it better myself. So unless there's any final things you want to say, Douglas, I think that's it for the interview.
No, Matt, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate this.
No, and thank you for being here too. We will likely see each other in person very soon, and hopefully, many of you will be able to join us. Thanks for coming on, Douglas.
Cheers, man.